Okay, Dan, we're really building up steam here with our retailer questions, and more importantly, the answers. They're rolling in. We got another one this week. Tell us a bit about this week's retailer question.
Well, this came from Alan in Pickering. I said to you earlier, I think I even know Alan from my days in furniture in Pickering, but his email address didn't come that way. So the email said to me, "Hi, Mr. Holman." Mr. Holman. I did remind him very quickly that Mr. Holman is my father.
There we go.
Not me. You can just call me Dan or Dummy, or I answer to just about anything, Rob. So anyways, Alan said, "Mr. Holman, on your podcast on February 5th, you talked about key themes for this year. Do you have a copy of those themes that you could send me, as well as any other shared content you think is important for a furniture retailer?" And so, we did maybe breeze through the themes from our partners at Management One a few weeks ago. So we're going to reshare that article from their president, Mike Alec.
Okay.
In this article, Mike outlines their 5 key themes for retail this year, or for retailers this year. And so 2021, their emphasis, these 5 themes, the emphasis on assortment planning and the fact that there's no going backwards, marketing, messaging and branding, the need to split your year into 2 halves, and then the 5th thing was building adaptability into your business. So for our partners at Management One, we're sharing this article again this week in the blog. Mike's done a fabulous job of putting this very concise theme together. And this is really how Management One is going to move through 2021 in the delivery of their education, which is probably a pretty good segue, Rob, to Alan's second part of his question.
Yep.
He asked about sharing other content that's important to, in his case, furniture retail, but really it's about sharing information that's important to retailers. And you and I have spoken several times about relevance. And this is a great opportunity to remind everyone about the importance of leaning on and into relevant news and educational content for your retail business. There is far too much doom and gloom in our media today, and Management One is just an example of someone you should be listening to. I do.
Yep.
They're connected to the largest, I believe, the largest indie retail audience on the planet. And they share content, strategies, and ideologies that help push business forward, your retail business forward.
So that's obviously retail driven, Dan, and like even Alan talked about, he wanted furniture retail info. What other information should retailers be looking for, in your opinion?
Well, Rob, my favorite way to consume new information, healthy information, is through newsletters, blog posts, and obviously podcasts.
Yep, here we are.
Now, every retailer should have their favorites. We've already talked about Management One, and everybody should be signed up to that newsletter. You should also think about the specific areas, the silos in your business, in where you are looking for inspiration or guidance.
Yep.
My go-to, I lean hard on Retail Insider. They've got great general retail news that is relevant to me. May not be relevant always to that indie clothing retailer, but that doesn't mean that they're not sharing great information that's relevant to you.
Right.
I also believe retailers should have a marketing source, a newsletter, a podcast that is focused on retail marketing. Crystal Media does a great job. Morning Brew, we read a lot of Morning Brew stuff, and it really comes from a marketing angle, and it's a good spot. They're good sources. Obviously, one of my favorite newsletters, Rob, is the Road 55. Your 5x5 Wednesday newsletter. Concise, informative, humorous sometimes, and it allows me to make a connection. And every bit of information that we consume, we have to take it in and say, okay, how does this apply to me? Does this apply to me?
Right.
If it does, then how? And is there a way for me to make this my own?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to make it your own.
And just on that, and you're kind of going down that path where breaking out of what I'll say is like just direct in your industry, because I'm just such a fan of I tell so many non-retailer businesses to listen to your podcast that's retail driven, because so many of the lessons really any entrepreneur can pull out and make it their own, just as you said.
Our whole thing about the podcast and creating this podcast, or I shouldn't say creating and adapting the podcast the way we did sort of post the first lockdown, was to pull news articles with a shift that we could apply even one little tidbit to a retailer's business that could help them. And that was the purpose. And there are lots of platforms out there, Rob, that's their focus. I mean, our POS platforms are always sharing really good content.
Yep.
And so important to sign up to their newsletters. And I think today, even if you don't use these podcast platforms, Shopify does a pretty good job of sharing relevant information. VendHQ.com, great job in sharing information. And of course, our partners at Retail Pro are going to bring to you retail information that fits that mid-market. And that's got relevant stuff for you. And sometimes that relevance is definitely driven by the inspiration it can provide. Those three POS platforms are my go-to for POS-driven news that talks about the way a retailer is adapting technology, point-of-sale technology, or ERP, or CRM product within the point-of-sale system. And it does share great information. Shopify's still doing a pretty good job of sharing decent information that doesn't have a sales hook to it. Right? That is just give without the intention of getting. Again, important note here, Rob, is to think about your business, the specific areas of your business. Stay out of mainstream media. Go find that specific, smaller, news-driven, story-driven, open-to-share-driven website, podcast, whatever kind of sources are you're looking for. The way you consume. I listen more than I read. I'm a terrible reader. I get caught up in thought, and then I'm off on my own tangent when I'm supposed to be reading something. And so probably much like the way I talk.
Squirrel.
Right? But so I listen to things more frequently than I read them. So podcasts are definitely one of my sort of favorite ways to share relevant information or consume relevant information. We as entrepreneurs, as business people, as retailers, need to learn and grow every single day. And the more time we spend inside our own little bubble will never get us the growth that we aspire to. And before I forget, I should have said what my favorite weekly newsletter was. It really does come from retailbycrs.com. The newsletter that we curate every single week, or that we produce every week, is a curated collection of what we believe are the last 7 to 10 days headlines with a spin. We promise to share headlines with a spin that makes it important to the indie retailer. We're going to pull out or extract tips and tricks and strategies and wins from all of these stories that make it more relevant to you. And if you're not signed up for our weekly newsletter, this is the time. I would encourage you, just sign up for it. Go to retailbycrs.com, hit that newsletter. There's a listing of all of the archived newsletters, every link we've ever shared, copies of the podcast. There's tons of information that's there and available for you for free. Nothing's free. For an investment in your time, there is good content there. So last plug, get over to retailbycrs.com and register for that newsletter. If you want to get a question answered, send me an email to dan@thewealthyretailer.com, and I promise a speedy personal response. No topic is off limits. Just send your question to dan@thewealthyretailer.com, and we'll answer it, much like we've done in the last, 3 or 4 weeks we've been pulling questions.